Then came the moment that still haunts me. Eliza had excused herself to the restroom, leaving her phone on the table next to her half-empty glass of wine. My gut had been churning for hours, my instincts screaming at me that something was off. I kept watching them throughout the night, the way Clark would lean in when she spoke, the way his hand would rest on her back just a second too long. I was tense, sitting there gripping my glass of scotch so hard I thought it would shatter in my hand. They thought no one was noticing, but I saw it. I saw everything. So, while she was away, I did something that went against everything I believed in. I reached for her phone. My hands were shaking, can you believe that? Me, the guy who tears apart legal arguments for a living, trembling like a nervous teenager. I didn't know what I was looking for. Honestly, part of me was hoping I wouldn't find anything, that I'd look like a paranoid asshole, and I could laugh it off later. But some part of me, deep down, already knew the truth. As I unlocked her phone, yes, I knew the passcode, we were married for Christ's sake, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I scrolled through her recent messages, nothing really standing out, just the usual back and forth with her coworkers and a couple of friends. My breathing was shallow, my eyes darting over each word, hoping, praying, to find nothing. And then, there it was. A message from Clark. Clark, of all people. At first glance, it was harmless. Can't wait to see you tonight, winky face, that's it. That's what it said. 7 words. 7 words that completely changed my life. The kind of text you could send to any friend before a party, right? But that stupid winking emoji at the end, that's what got me. That fucking wink was like a knife twisting in my gut. It wasn't just some casual, friendly message. It was something more, something hidden beneath the surface. My blood ran cold. The words blurred on the screen as I sat there, frozen. I scrolled up, hoping to find some kind of explanation, something to convince me that I was jumping to conclusions. But the more I read, the worse it got. It wasn't overt, no. They weren't dumb enough to send anything explicit, but there was a subtext there, something intimate, something that went way beyond friendship. There were inside jokes, little flirtatious comments that they both knew only the other would understand. Things like, remember last time, winky face, and, I hope we can find a better spot tonight. It didn't take a genius to figure out what they were talking about. I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling the ground beneath me give way. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, my best friend, started crumbling down like a house of cards. You know that moment in movies where everything slows down, and the main character has this out-of-body experience? That's exactly how it felt. It was like watching my entire world unravel in slow motion, and I couldn't do a damn thing to stop it. I must have read that text a dozen times, my mind trying to make sense of it. My pulse was racing, my palms sweaty, the noise of the party around me fading into the background. For a brief moment, I even considered putting the phone back and pretending I hadn't seen anything. I mean, maybe I was overreacting, right? Maybe this was all just some innocent misunderstanding. But the pit in my stomach told me otherwise. This wasn't innocent. This was betrayal in its rawest form, and I was standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to fall. Eliza came back from the restroom, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. She smiled, asked me if I wanted another drink, completely unaware that her entire charade was about to come crashing down. I slipped her phone back onto the table before she could notice I had been holding it, trying to act as normal as possible, even though I felt like I was about to explode. I forced a smile and nodded, my throat tight, my mind screaming at me to do something, say something. But I couldn't. Not yet. That was the moment I realized our marriage was hanging by a thread, and I had no idea how to fix it, or if I even wanted to anymore. I sat there, watching her, my heart pounding in my chest, knowing that from this point on, nothing would ever be the same. I needed more proof. As much as that text knotted me, part of me still hoped I was wrong. Maybe it was just my imagination running wild, fueled by paranoia and jealousy. Maybe that message didn't mean what I thought it did. I tried to convince myself it could all be innocent, that I was overthinking everything. But deep down, I knew the truth. I just didn't want to accept it yet. I needed to see it for myself, to be sure, because if I was going to confront Eliza and blow this whole thing up, I couldn't afford to be wrong. So, one evening, when Eliza said she'd be working late, I decided to follow her. Yeah, it sounds like something straight out of a bad detective movie, but desperate times called for desperate measures. She had been working late a lot lately, claiming she had big projects coming up, meetings with clients, and tight deadlines. I had swallowed her excuses for weeks, trying to play the understanding husband. But that night, I wasn't going to be played anymore. I waited until she left the house, her heels clicking confidently down the driveway, her perfume lingering in the air like poison. I gave her a few minutes to get a head start before grabbing my car keys and heading out. My heart was pounding as I tailed her, keeping a safe distance so she wouldn't spot me. She wasn't headed toward the office, that much was clear. Instead, she was driving toward the city center, which immediately set off alarm bells in my head. Why the hell would she need to go downtown for work? After about 20 minutes, she pulled into the parking lot of a small hotel. You know the kind I'm talking about, cheap, quiet, out of the way, the kind of place where people go to disappear for a few hours. My stomach churned as I parked down the street, far enough that she wouldn't notice me but close enough to keep an eye on her. I watched as she got out of the car, casually glancing around, clearly making sure no one was watching. And then, right on cue, he showed up. Clark. There he was, my best friend, walking toward her like he didn't have a care in the world. Like he wasn't about to meet my wife at some sleazy hotel. I gripped the steering wheel so hard I thought it might snap in my hands. My chest was tight, and I could feel my pulse in my ears as the scene unfolded in front of me, a living nightmare I couldn't wake up from. They didn't waste any time. As soon as Clark reached her, he wrapped his arm around her waist like it was the most natural thing in the world, pulling her in close. My breath hitched as I watched him lean down, pressing his lips to hers in a slow, deliberate kiss. It wasn't rushed, wasn't some quick, guilty peck. No, this was something deeper, something that screamed of routine. The way they moved together, the way their bodies fit perfectly, it was clear this wasn't the first time. Not by a long shot. I sat there, watching my wife betray me. Watching the woman I had loved for over a decade fall into the arms of another man. My best friend. My fucking brother. They stood there for what felt like hours, lost in each other, completely unaware that I was sitting just yards away, watching their every move. It was humiliating. I felt like a fool. Like every happy memory, every tender moment we had shared was suddenly a lie. And I was the idiot who hadn't seen it coming. The pain was sharp, stabbing at me with every second that passed, but mixed with that pain was something else, something darker. I was angry. No, I was beyond angry. I was furious. But even then, as I watched them laughing quietly and walking toward the hotel entrance, I didn't lose control. I couldn't afford to. Not yet. I wanted to storm out of the car and confront them right there. I wanted to scream, punch Clark in his smug face, and drag Eliza out by her hair. But that wouldn't have done any good. No, that would have been too easy for them. I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. Instead, I stayed put, silently seething, every fiber of my being focused on keeping myself together. Because I had a plan. I wasn't going to let this end on their terms. This wasn't going to be some pathetic story where the guy gets cheated on and just takes it. No. I was going to make sure they paid for what they did. But I needed time. I needed to think, to prepare. So, I sat there, in the shadows, watching them disappear into the hotel, knowing full well what was about to happen behind those walls. And instead of confronting them, I turned the engine on and drove away. My revenge was starting to take shape in my mind, and when it was all said and done, it wasn't going to be pretty. Revenge wasn't something I could rush. I needed to be smart, to gather as much information as possible before making my move. So, I became a shadow, always one step behind them but never letting them know I was there. I started by recording their phone calls. Eliza had become predictable, always stepping outside to take her work calls when she thought I wasn't paying attention. I installed a program on her phone, something I'd picked up from a tech-savvy client, so I could listen to everything. I followed her on days she said she'd be working late, waiting for her to meet Clark in one of their regular spots. The anger inside me was growing, building with every piece of evidence I collected, but I didn't let it consume me. Not yet. I didn't just want to expose them. That would have been too easy. If I'd just come out and told the world they were fucking behind my back, sure, it would have caused a scandal, but they would have moved on eventually. No. I wanted them to feel the same humiliation, the same pain that had been gnawing at me since the day I saw that text. They had to suffer, and I was going to make sure of it. And that's when the call came, Haley, Clark's wife. It was unexpected, to say the least. I hadn't spoken to her in weeks. She and Clark had always seemed like the perfect couple, at least on the surface. If I was blindsided by Eliza's betrayal, I couldn't imagine what Haley was going through. But when she called, she was surprisingly calm. At first, I didn't think much of it. She just asked how I was doing, made small talk, the usual pleasantries. But there was something in her voice that caught my attention, an uncertainty, like she was trying to figure something out without coming right out and saying it. Then, after a long pause, she finally hinted at what was really on her mind. "Troy, I need to ask you something. Do you think Clark might be seeing someone?" Her voice cracked just a little, enough for me to hear the pain she was holding back. My throat tightened, and I felt my stomach churn. How was I supposed to answer that? Here she was, probably just starting to suspect what was going on, while I already had the whole sordid picture. I couldn't just dump it all on her over the phone. So, I stayed silent for a moment, trying to figure out what to say. She kept talking, as if the silence was giving her permission to spill her doubts. She told me how Clark had been working late more often, how he'd been distant, distracted. How she'd found herself wondering if there was someone else, but she hadn't wanted to believe it. She hadn't wanted to be that wife, the one who jumps to conclusions without proof. But now, things were starting to add up, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was going on. I wanted to tell her the truth right then and there. I wanted to just let it all out, tell her that not only was her husband cheating, but he was doing it with my wife. But something held me back. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe I didn't want to see her face fall the way mine had when I first found out. So, I just listened. I let her pour out her suspicions, her fears, everything she had been holding inside. And then she asked me the question that made my heart stop. "Troy," she said, her voice quieter now, almost a whisper. Do you suspect something?" Her words hung in the air like a heavy weight, and I knew I couldn't lie to her. Not anymore. I had been holding on to this secret for too long, and it was eating me alive. So, I nodded, even though she couldn't see it over the phone. My voice was thick as I finally spoke. "Yeah, Haley. I do." There was a pause, and I could almost hear the pieces falling into place in her mind. But instead of breaking down, like I half expected her to, she was quiet. And then she said something I hadn't anticipated. "Let's meet." We met the next day at a small cafe, one of those quiet spots no one really notices. I got there first, and when she walked in, I barely recognized her. Haley had always been composed, put together, but now she looked different, tired, almost hollow. She sat down across from me, avoiding eye contact at first, nervously stirring her coffee as if the answers to all her problems might be hiding at the bottom of the cup. Neither of us knew how to begin, so we just sat there in uncomfortable silence for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's been distant, Troy. Coming home late, making excuses. It's like he's not even here anymore. I don't know what to do." I sat there, my hands gripping the edge of the table, trying to figure out how to say it. How do you tell someone that their whole world is about to come crashing down? I wanted to protect her from the truth, but I knew I couldn't keep it from her forever. So, when she looked me in the eye and asked, "Do you think he's cheating on me?" I couldn't hold it in anymore. "I think he is," I said, my voice barely steady. "And I think it's with Eliza." Her face changed in an instant, the sadness replaced by something colder, more resolute. But she didn't cry. She didn't break down. Instead, she leaned in closer, her eyes narrowing with a steely determination I hadn't expected. "Then let's make them pay." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. She wasn't looking for pity or sympathy. She was looking for revenge. And suddenly, I realized we were on the same page. She wasn't going to be a victim, and neither was I. We were going to take back control, together. I nodded, the gears in my mind already turning. We were going to do this right, and when we were done, Clark and Eliza wouldn't know what hit them. From that moment, Haley and I started seeing each other more often. It was supposed to be strictly business, planning how to catch our spouses in the act, but there was something else growing between us. We were both broken, shattered by the betrayal of the people we trusted most. And in that shared pain, we found an unspoken connection. She understood what I was going through in a way no one else could. The more we talked, the closer we became. She'd vent about Clark, and I'd unload my anger about Eliza, but there was always this tension between us, something simmering just beneath the surface, waiting to break free. One evening, Haley came over to my place. It had become a routine of sorts, dinners, late-night talks, planning what we were going to do next. But that night was different. I had cooked dinner for us, something simple, but I could barely focus on the food. The conversation was strained. We talked about Clark and Eliza, how we'd get our revenge, how we'd expose them for the liars they were. But beneath it all, there was something heavier in the air. I could feel it, and I knew she felt it too. She looked stunning that night. Her long dark hair flowed over her shoulders, and her eyes, normally full of sadness and pain, sparkled with something else, something raw and untamed. She wore this simple black dress, nothing flashy, but damn, did it hug her curves. I tried to focus on what we were discussing, tried to keep my mind on our plan, but I couldn't help the way my eyes kept drifting to her lips, her neck, the way she moved. After dinner, we didn't get up right away. We just sat there, the silence stretching between us, heavy and charged. I could feel her eyes on me, and when I finally looked at her, she wasn't looking away. She was staring right at me, and in that moment, everything else faded. "Troy," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper, "we're just as much cheaters as they are." The words hit me hard, but she wasn't done. "But I can't keep this inside any longer." Her hand moved to my shoulder, her touch warm and electric. My breath caught in my throat. We both knew what was happening, knew what we were about to do. A part of me wanted to stop, to pull away and keep things from going too far. But another part of me, a part one hadn't felt in a long time, was pulling me toward her. It was like all the anger, the betrayal, the hurt, was boiling over, and she was the only person who could understand it. I leaned in, our faces inches apart, and before I could think twice, our lips collided in a kiss that was all-consuming. It wasn't soft or gentle, it was desperate, hungry, like we were trying to pour every ounce of our pain into each other. Her lips were soft, her breath shaky, and as I pulled her closer, I felt her body melt into mine. There was no turning back now. We didn't stop. I grabbed her by the waist, lifting her onto my lap, and she responded with equal intensity, her hands running through my hair, pulling me closer, needing more. We stumbled to the couch, bodies tangling together in a mess of raw emotion and desire. I hadn't felt this kind of passion in years, not with Eliza, not with anyone. Haley's touch, her skin against mine, it was everything I had been missing. The anger, the betrayal, it all faded into the background as we lost ourselves in each other. Her dress slid off easily, and soon we were tangled in each other's limbs, moving together with an urgency that surprised me. It wasn't just about sex. It was about reclaiming something we'd both lost, something our spouses had taken from us. Her moans filled the room as we moved from the couch to the floor, then to the bedroom, and even to the bathroom, neither of us willing to stop, neither of us wanting to come down from the high of forgetting who we were, if only for a few hours. The sex was wild, passionate, chaotic, a storm of emotions wrapped up in flesh and heat. We were two people trying to outrun our pain, using each other as an escape from the mess our lives had become. And for those few hours, it worked. I wasn't thinking about Eliza or Clark. I wasn't thinking about revenge or betrayal. I was thinking about Haley, about her body, her warmth, her breathless moans in my ear. But afterward, when the heat of the moment faded and the reality set in, I lay there staring at the ceiling, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on me like a boulder. Haley was asleep next to me, her body curled against mine, but I couldn't close my eyes. The truth was gnawing at me, digging into my gut. I had betrayed Eliza, yes. But more than that, I had betrayed myself. In letting go, in crossing that line, I had become part of the very thing I hated. I had stooped to their level, and no amount of revenge would ever change that. After that night with Haley, everything shifted. It wasn't just the sex that changed things, it was the realization that I had crossed a line, both physically and morally. The floodgates had opened, and all the anger, betrayal, and despair I had kept buried for so long came rushing out. Haley and I continued seeing each other, but now, each time we met, there was a constant undercurrent of tension, a fear that we'd be caught. The passion between us was undeniable, but so was the growing anxiety. We were both playing with fire, and we knew it. Still, she was the only person who truly understood me during this time. With Haley, I didn't have to pretend, didn't have to wear the mask of the composed, successful lawyer who had it all together. She saw through all that. And as much as we tried to stick to our original plan, to get revenge on Eliza and Clark, the lines kept blurring. Our conversations became more strained, our meetings charged with a mix of passion and guilt. But despite everything, we couldn't stay away from each other. We were both too deep into this mess. Meanwhile, things with Eliza kept spiraling downward. We barely spoke, and when we did, it was like talking to a stranger. The warmth, the love, everything that had once made us work as a couple, had evaporated. Our conversations were cold and clinical, like two people forced to share the same space but with nothing left to say. I couldn't take it anymore. I was done playing the part of the oblivious husband. I had seen enough, heard enough, and felt enough. I didn't want to be the one who walked away looking defeated, though. No, after everything I discovered about her affair with Clark, I was determined to take control. If anyone was going to walk away with their dignity intact, it was going to be me. I needed to act fast, and I needed to be ruthless. Then came the call that changed everything. It was my private investigator. After weeks of following them, digging into their every move, he had finally delivered the one thing that would seal the deal: evidence. Real, hard, undeniable evidence. He handed me a folder filled with photos, videos, and screenshots of their conversations. There they were, in living color, Eliza and Clark, caught red-handed at that hotel. I had everything I needed to not only confront Eliza, but also to take her down in court. With cheaters, you don't play fair, and I wasn't about to start now. The moment I got that folder, everything shifted in my mind. I had been waiting for this, waiting for the moment when I could take control of the situation and flip the narrative. I wasn't going to let Eliza play the victim or manipulate the situation anymore. This was my move now. That evening, I decided to set the stage. I cooked dinner, nothing fancy, just enough to make it seem like a normal night. I poured wine, lit some candles, and waited. I had to keep calm, had to make it look like everything was fine. When Eliza came home, she was already suspicious. I could see it in the way she hesitated at the door, in the way her eyes scanned the room like she was trying to figure out what was going on. But she sat down at the table anyway, took a sip of wine, and forced a smile. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady, even though my heart was racing. I watched as she gripped her wine glass a little tighter. I started off slow, gentle, almost like nothing was wrong. I didn't want her to see what was coming. But the moment she started with her excuses, trying to justify her late nights, trying to pretend like everything was still fine, that's when I pulled out the photos. I laid them out on the table in front of her, one by one. Her and Clark, standing too close in that hotel parking lot. A picture of them holding hands, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. And the final one, a shot of them kissing outside the hotel. Her face went white as a sheet, the blood draining from her cheeks. She stared at the photos, her hands shaking. "How could you do this?" she finally shouted, her voice breaking with a mixture of fear and anger. But there was no remorse in her eyes, just shock that she had been caught. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I just looked at her coldly, my words coming out like ice. "You're the one who betrayed us, Eliza. Not me." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle over her. "I'm filing for divorce. And by the way, I've already spoken to my lawyer." That last line hit her hard. She hadn't expected me to be the one in control. She had assumed she'd be able to manipulate her way through this, maybe even turn the tables on me somehow. But now she was realizing just how wrong she had been. I wasn't the naive husband she thought she could play. I had the evidence, the leverage, and the upper hand. Eliza sat there, stunned, her eyes flicking from the photos to me, trying to figure out what her next move could be. But it was too late. I had already taken the first step, and there was no going back. The next day, I filed for divorce, armed with every piece of evidence I had gathered. I hired one of the best divorce lawyers in the city, someone who was as relentless as I needed them to be. We had one goal, to make sure Eliza walked away with nothing. I demanded half of everything, our joint assets, the house, the cars, everything we had built together. But more than that, I positioned myself to take financial control. I wasn't just going to walk away. I was going to win. After I filed for divorce, things began to move faster than I expected. Eliza, who thought she could somehow save her reputation, was left scrambling. But it was too late for damage control. Word of her affair with Clark spread through our social circles like wildfire. In no time, she lost several of her key work contracts. No one wanted to be associated with the scandal, and even the clients who once praised her cut ties. She was drowning in the mess she'd created, and the harder she tried to swim, the more she sank. And Clark? That cocky bastard thought he could slither out of the situation without consequences. He was wrong. Haley made sure of that. She had been quiet at first, letting me take the lead with Eliza, but then she moved in for the kill. Right after I filed for divorce, Haley filed her own. But she didn't stop there. She made sure that her testimony was brutal, exposing Clark's affair, his neglect, and his shady business dealings. Her accusations tore him apart, not just personally but professionally as well. The plot twist came when Haley and I decided to team up in more ways than one. While Clark was distracted, dealing with the fallout of his personal life, I went after his business. I struck deals with some of his key clients, the ones who saw the writing on the wall and knew that Clark was finished. They switched to me without hesitation. I made sure they knew I had the upper hand, and soon enough, Clark's entire business empire was crumbling. He was bleeding money, losing contracts, and facing lawsuits. There was no escape for him. He thought he could walk away unscathed, but Haley and I made sure he didn't. Clark was destroyed, both in business and in his personal life. And watching him fall gave me a strange sense of satisfaction. Not because I wanted to see him suffer, but because it proved that I had come out on top. I hadn't let him or Eliza break me. I had taken control of my life and made sure they paid for what they did. A few weeks after the dust settled, Haley and I met again. But this time, it wasn't just about plotting revenge or celebrating our small victories. It was different. We had become more than just partners in this twisted game. We had become close. Really close. Our meetings weren't filled with the same raw, angry passion as before. Now, there was something deeper between us. The sex changed too. It wasn't just wild and reckless, it became something emotional, something that felt like the start of something real. Haley understood me in a way no one else ever had, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had someone by my side who truly got me. Months passed, and the divorce was finalized. I walked away with the house, a substantial portion of the assets, and full control of the business I had once shared with Clark. Eliza was left with nothing. She tried to rebuild her life, but without me as her safety net, she struggled. Her betrayal had cost her more than just our marriage, it had cost her everything. As for Clark, well, he wasn't much better off. Haley left him, and with the debts piling up and his reputation in tatters, he drowned in the gossip that swirled around him. His life had fallen apart, and there was no one left to help him pick up the pieces. Haley and I, on the other hand, didn't have to hide anymore. Our relationship became public, and neither of us cared what people thought. We had survived the storm, and now we were building something real together. We weren't just two broken people seeking revenge anymore. We had one. Both of us. And we were ready to move forward, leaving Eliza and Clark in the dust. I stood there, looking at everything I had gained, my freedom, my business, my future with Haley, and I felt nothing but victory. I had played the game coldly and calculated every step. And the best part? I didn't regret a single one.